My Lords, my prior amendment removed criminalisation of offensive speech. This second amendment removes criminalisation of hate as a motive. Mostly this relates to where if a particular kind of hate directed at particular protected characteristics is proved to be involved, then the crime is considered to be aggravated, so the sentence is then increased. It also includes crimes associated with the stirring up of hatred. Enhancing a convicted person's sentence for an aggravated offence is a peculiar idea. In his latest Netflix special, which I'm quite sure most noble lords have watched at least once, the comedian Ricky Gervais directly mocks this law to loud audience applause. Recognition of the foolishness of the idea has now spread into popular culture. If I kick you to the ground, either for no reason, I'm not very good at fighting, so I probably wouldn't, my lords, but if I did, either for no reason, or let's say because I hated your ginger hair, and I cause you grievous damage, I go to jail for 5 years. But if I do exactly the same because I hate your sexual orientation or some other protected characteristics, that's, say, 10 years. This, Ricky Gervais pointed out, implies that motiveless crime, or indeed one motivated by hate against a non-protected characteristic, is not as bad as the same crime where there is hatred against a particular protected characteristic. I find that, my lords, nonsensical. So did he, and as he said to applause, it's a crime. Punish the crime. Certainly, prosecution would be far simpler, investigations far more straightforward, if we just address the crime, not the thoughts behind it. The whole idea of punishing thought is what used to be described as happening in a totalitarian state. Thought crime. Directly stirring up violence should, of course, be criminalised. But criminalising the stirring up of hatred towards people with protected characteristics falls foul of free speech concerns in two different ways. First, you criminalise someone's words through proving a very hard-to-discern intent to stir up, based on the individual's protected characteristics. And second, you criminalise their having stirred up certain specified equally hard-to-discern thoughts about people with those protected characteristics in other people's minds. Note, my lords, that the current popularity of the TV series Traitors is precisely because of how impossible it is to detect another's hidden thoughts. If those clever people on TV can't do it, what chance has a court? It would be far better just to criminalise the stirring up of violence. After all, if violence is stirred up, then a conviction occurs, so no further prosecution is necessary. While if no violence is stirred up, why, given the concerns that will be raised about free speech and the like, criminalise the words? The key provisions in this amendment are first to repeal or omit parts Romans 3 and Arabic 3a of the Public Order Act 1986, which increases the imprisonment term to up to 7 years, where in addition to the original crime, there is also the intentional stirring up of hate or likelihood that hate will be stirred up based on race, religion, or sexual orientation. Not, the noble Lady Brinton will note, disability, interestingly enough. Second, to omit sections 28 to 33 of the Crime and Disorder Act 1988, which increased the imprisonment term to up to 14 years for when an assault, criminal damage, public order offences or harassment is racially or religiously aggravated. And third, to omit section 66 of the Sentencing Code, which increases sentences for certain crimes where there is, in addition, hostility to actual or presumed racial, religious, disability, sexual orientation, or transgender characteristics. Stirring up, intentional or otherwise, is considered an aggravator that leads to higher sentences, although there is, I should mention, a somewhat ambiguous partial get-out for religious hostility. I won't repeat the points I made in the previous amendment speech about the multiple ways in which these laws fail to work, but I did then promise to talk in particular during this amendment about the way in which hate crime law is clogging up the judicial system. So here goes on that. First, police forces. They're wasting thousands of hours on investigating hate crime allegations. Dozens are arrested every day, as my noble friend Lord Young of Action pointed out, for online posts. Around 140,000 hate crimes recorded annually across race, sexual orientation, religion, disability and transgender. The police now being sued for wrongful arrest by, among many, Graham Linehan. The noble Baroness Lady Nicholson has alleged that in that case, the police were manipulated into the arrest by a transgender former police constable who had some time before been dismissed for gross misconduct. A general public perception now arises that phone theft is downplayed, shoplifting ignored, carjacking, burglaries, sexual offences all have less time spent on them than if the police could focus on them rather than being distracted by their pursuit of hate crime. Second, the Crown Prosecution Service is flummoxed by what the law actually says. Isabel Vaughan Spruce has been left in legal limbo for almost a year after being arrested for standing in silence in an abortion buffer zone, with the CPS still unable to decide whether she should be prosecuted or not. She's already received 5-figure payouts from the police, as I mentioned, that's our money, for previous unlawful arrests, but again, the year-long process is her punishment. The Quran burner's violent knife attacker was only given a suspended sentence, yet the CPS is still seeking to convict the Quran burner himself of a criminal offence, using the violence of his attacker as proof that the Quran burning stirred up disorder. This, my lords, is a blasphemy law in all but name. The law lord, Jonathan Sumption, has pointed out that the CPS has issued official advice that hatred can include ill will, ill feeling, spite, contempt, prejudice, unfriendliness. Unfriendliness. So now, my lords, we have compelled friendliness, antagonism, resentment and dislike. And the CPS showed their advanced level of confusion by advising that evidence of hostility is not required for an incident or crime to be recorded as a hate crime or hate incident. They have now withdrawn that last piece of advice, but not before sowing much confusion. We cannot blame the CPS too much, my lords. The legislation is overall a dog's dinner. The list of hate words in the actual legislation is long: anxiety, insulting, distress, harassment, alarm, threatening, annoyance, inconvenience, abusive. In some of the hate crime laws, only 1 or 2 of these words appear. In others, up to 5 of those words appear, but never the full 9 of the words in any of the legislation. Distress happens to be the most favoured word in the legislation. It appears in 7 out of the 11 laws. Poor old annoyance only appears in 1 of these laws. And as for the 5 protected characteristics that are mentioned in the various laws, again, an incoherent mishmash. Some hate laws mention only 1 protected characteristic, while only the sentencing code mentions all of them. Transgender appears the least frequently. Now, of course, my lords, we could with difficulty make an attempt to help the CPS by clearing all of this up, but we could also sort the problem out much more easily by just abandoning this whole hate crime approach, focusing on the deed rather than the thought in what we prosecute. Third, the courts are burdened. The government is proposing to abolish many jury trials because the courts are overworked. Well, if we got rid of hate crime laws, isn't that a better way to free up court time? And because of the ambiguity in the law, it's a postcode lottery at the courts. Acquittals on the silent prayer issue in Birmingham, but convictions in Bournemouth. Fourth, the prisons are overburdened. I estimate just a few hundreds, very likely less, hate crime offenders currently imprisoned. But given the recent reports of a crime wave due to violent prisoners having been released early, surely every single freed-up prison place that could come from abolition of these laws should count as a blessing. And I'd almost, my lords, forgotten to include the probation service, but was handily reminded that they are burdened as well by a newspaper article today revealing that Lucy Connolly, I don't think I need to say who she is, has been told by her probation officer that she was risking being sent back to jail after spending around a year there for a tweet, after some random unknown member of the public, complained that they were offended and that she was inciting violence because she had retweeted a meme suggesting that Donald Trump should send troops to kidnap Keir Starmer. Now, as far as I know, my lords, there are quite possibly some Labour peers and MPs who share her sentiment. But even if they express that sentiment in public, I would argue that they should definitely not go to jail for doing that. It's just yet another example of the metastasization of these hate laws and a waste of probation officers' time. All of these problems could, my lords, be resolved were we to cut out or severely cut back on this large and recently introduced body of hate crime law. I urge noble lords to embrace the benefits of cleaning up and slimming down our criminal law, focusing better on the real physical and cyber crime that besets our country at this time, and that in many cases goes unpursued and unpunished because there are not enough judicial resources to pursue these crimes vigorously enough, to which end I beg to move this amendment.